Welcome, everyone. We are live. Listen, it is Thursday night, so you know what that means. It's Friday tomorrow. Hello. Listen, if you come to tomorrow's morning inspiration, we're going to do exercises. Oh, yes, we're going to do exercises because I think it is important because we're all going through something at some point, but we all need to know how to get through things. So I think the exercises are relevant as well. Okay? Because you can hear how to do it, and I always do my best to tell you how to do it, but tomorrow I will dedicate that time to simply being about the exercise. Okay, anyhow, wherever you are, except if you're driving, keep driving. Just, you don't have time for me when you're driving because you got to focus on the road. But for those of you who are not driving, you just relaxing, well, then continue to relax. We are on the law and the promise, chapter 8, through the looking glass. Listen to this excerpt from George Herbert, this poem. A man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or if he pleaseth, through it pass, and then the heaven is spy. Do you understand what it means? A man that looks on the glass, he can keep his eye focused right on it. And if he pleases, he can just look at the glass or he can pass through the glass. He can look right through the glass and see heaven. That is what it means when a man that looks on glass, on it may stay his eye, or if he pleaseth, through it pass, and then the heaven espy. George Herbert. Objects to be perceived must first penetrate in some manner our brain. But we are not, because of this, interlocked with our environment. Although normal consciousness is focused on the senses and is usually restricted to them, it is possible for man to pass through his sense fixation into any imaginal structure which he conceives and so fully occupy it that it is more alive and more responsive than that on which his senses stay his eye. This is saying to you, yes, we may be restricted by our senses, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, tongue, skin, we may be restricted by them, but it is possible for us to fix our our sense into an imaginal structure which he conceives in his mind's eye. And you occupy it so fully that it is more alive than the real thing that you're seeing or smelling or touching on the outside. That's what that means. It says, if this were not true, man would be an automaton reflecting life, never affecting it. Man, who is all imagination, is not tenant to the brain, but landlord. Hello? Man, who is all imagination, is not tenant to the brain, but the landlord. He need not rest content with the appearance of things, which means you don't have to be content with something you don't want. You can change it. Or how? Well, continue listening and you'll hear. It says he can go beyond perceptual to conceptual awareness. This ability to pass through the mechanical reflective structure of the senses is the most important discovery man can make. It reveals man as a center of imagining with powers of intervention, which enable him to alter the course of observed events, moving from success to success through a series of mental transformations in himself. LD, no, not about the Bible per se. This is The Law and the Promise by Neville Goddard. We are on chapter 8, Through the Looking Glass. But there is going to be some scripture in it. Don't fret. Don't be offended by scripture. There's a secret hidden in it. And if you apply that hidden secret, you can change your life. It says, attention is the spearhead of imagining. So, attention, the spearhead of imagining, may be either attracted from without as his senses stay the eye, meaning, so what you're looking at holds your attention. You know, you're looking at the clouds, you're looking at the sunset, that holds your attention. But imagining holds the attention also, but not because the eyes are looking at it, but here. Attention, the spearhead of imagining, may be either attracted from without as his senses stay his eye, or directed from within if he pleases, and through the senses pass into the wish fulfilled. To move from perceptual awareness or things as they seem to conceptual awareness or things as they ought to be, we imagine as vivid and as lifelike a representation as possible of what we would see, hear, and do were we physically present and physically experiencing things as they ought to be and imaginatively participate in that scene. Nothing, Akura. There was never one there. There was never one there, my dear. That is my genetics. That is my DNA. Okay. Listen to this story. The following story tells of one who went through the glass and broke the chains that bound her, Shea Butter. So tonight, if you are out here and you're looking through the world through your eyes, and you say, "Ooh, I feel stuck," this story is for you. Don't worry, this story is also for me. But I got a testimony for you all, don't fret. A woman says, 2 years ago, I was taken to the hospital with a serious blood clot condition, which apparently had affected the entire vascular system, causing hardening of arteries and arthritis. A nerve in my head was damaged and my thyroid enlarged. Doctors could not agree on the cause of this condition, and all their treatments were completely ineffective. I was forced to give up my every enjoyable activity and remain in bed most of the time. I see you, you're local. I was forced to give up my every enjoyable activity and remain in bed most of the time. My body from hips to toes felt as though it was encased and bound by tight wires, and I couldn't put my feet on the floor without wearing heavy hip length elastic stockings. Well, I knew something of your teachings, Neville, and I tried very hard to apply what I had heard. But as my condition grew worse and I could no longer attend any of your lectures, my despondency grew deeper. Her sadness, her depression grew deeper. It says, one day, a friend sent me a postcard picturing the scene of a lovely beach by the ocean. The picture was so beautiful. I looked at it and began to remember past summer days at the seashore with my parents. And for a moment, the postcard picture seemed to become animated, and flooding memories of myself running free on the beach filled my mind. I felt the impact of my bare feet against the hard, wet sand. I felt the icy water running over my toes and heard the crash of waves breaking on the shore. This imaginal activity was so satisfying to me as I lay in bed that I continued to imagine this wonderful scene day after day for about a week. One morning, I moved from my bed to a couch and had started to sit up when I was seized with such an excruciating pain. My entire body became paralyzed. I could neither sit up nor lie down. This terrible pain lasted for more than a full minute, but when it stopped, listen to what she says. But when the pain stopped, I was free. It seemed as if all the wires binding my legs had been cut. One moment I was bound, the next moment I was free. Not by degrees, but instantly. And this letter was signed by V.H. Now, let me go back here. Remember, she said she knew something of his teachings, and she tried very hard to apply what she had heard. But as her condition grew worse, so too did her despondency, her depression. She just sank lower and lower. But there was something within her that wanted to change. Something was there. How do you know something was there? Because one day a friend sent me a postcard. Now, the postcard was so beautiful. It took her all the way back to her childhood. So she was on the beach. All the way back to her childhood, she went. Even from her place of despondency, even from her place of depression. You see, she wanted relief. And somebody from a distance sent her a postcard. The person didn't visit her. Somebody just sent her a postcard. And that postcard triggered a memory so beautiful that she lingered in that memory until it felt alive. So you see, this is part of tomorrow's morning inspiration. Because I was talking to somebody earlier and I said, I got to talk about this because sometimes we go through things and we feel like we can't make it. Well, that's what this letter is telling you. She felt as if she could not because her situation had gotten so much worse. But look at something simple. And you see, we think we have to force things to happen. Somebody sent her a postcard. And because they sent her the postcard, she didn't throw it away. The picture so captivated her that she felt the cold water on her toes. She felt the hard sand under her feet, and she flashed all the way back to her childhood. And it felt so beautiful to her that that's where she wanted to stay because it was reprieve. It was feeling better than what she was presently feeling from a place of despondency. So she stayed there. Hmm. She stayed there and she imagined herself just running on the beach. Until one morning she woke up and that pain overtook her. But then after the pain passed, she was no longer in pain. Some would say coincidence. Well, we already know what a coincidence is. A coincidence is the external experience that matches the internal thought. What did she do? All she did was imagine herself frolicking on the beach. She was in too much pain to do anything else. But she frolicked in her mind's eye for so long and with such intensity that what did she say? I was free. Not by degree, but instantly she was free. So, to carry on, I see you, NSR7. I see you. Thank you for that beautiful message. If you're still here, thank you for that message. We walk by faith, not by sight. What does that mean? To walk by faith means she looked at that picture and she put herself in that picture and she walked in that picture. She walked by faith. If she was walking by sight, she would have stayed in bed because she couldn't walk. That was walking by sight. She couldn't walk. So she stayed in bed because the pain was too intense. So that's walking by sight. Looking at what you're experiencing and saying, well, that's all there is. There's nothing else I can do. But she walked by faith. How, you ask? She just looked at that postcard and took such pleasure in receiving the postcard and seeing such a beautiful picture that she flashed all the way back. And she didn't just flash back, she flashed back with beautiful memories that felt good to her body. Thus, she set herself free. Good evening, Wisdom Almighty. It says, when we walk by sight, we know our way by objects which our eyes see. When we walk by faith, we order our life by scenes and actions which only imagination sees. Man perceives by the eye of imagination or by sense. But two mental attitudes to perception are possible: the creative, imaginative effort, which meets with an imaginative response, or the unimaginative staying of the eye, which merely reflects. Man has within him the principle of life and the principle of death. One is the imagination building its imaginal structures out of the generous dreams of fancy. The other is the imagination building its imaginal structures from images reflected by the chill wind of fact. One creates, the other perpetuates. Oh, say it again. One creates, and the other perpetuates. Man must adopt either the way of faith or the way of sight. To the extent that man builds from dreams of fancy, well, he is alive. And therefore, the development of the faculty to pass through the reflective glass of the senses is an increase of life. Well, it follows that restricting the imagination by staying the eye on the reflective glass of the senses is a reduction of life. So, which one do you think creates and which one do you think perpetuates? Oh, listen, I just love it because it rhymes. So, to create is to use the imagination to do what? To pass through the reflective glass of the senses. But to perpetuate is to continually go with what you see with the eyes. And Lord knows when I take them off, I can't see beans. So I explained to you what it means to walk by faith and what it means to walk by sight. To walk by faith, you are the one creating the scenes and the attitudes in your mind's eye that you affect life with. But when you look out into the world, you look at your bank account, you look at the fact that you don't have a job, you look at the fact that you're single, and you say, oh, but I cannot. You're walking by sight. And when you walk by sight, you perpetuate it. You perpetuate what you see. And let me tell you something. I hate eating crow, but I had to eat that one just now. Creating, right? Imagination creates. But looking through the senses of the, let's say it the way he said it. One creates and the other perpetuates. So imagination creates. But looking with the eye and going with what we call the facts, just like the woman who wrote the letter just now. And she said I was bedridden, I couldn't move. Those were her words, not mine. So that's what she said. If she had stayed living by sight, she would have perpetually remained in bed. But because from the depths of her spirit, even without speaking, she said, now how do you know? Because it's not speculation that she reached out. In the letter, it said, Neville, I knew of your lectures, but as my pain grew worse, I could no longer attend. So we knew she wanted to change. But because of the depths of her depression or despondency, she could not go to where he was. But you know she wanted to change because she said in her letter, I knew of your lectures and I tried to apply. The very fact of you trying to apply opens the door for your freedom. How do we know? She said in her letter she was despondent. She was so depressed and broken. She could do nothing, but she knew she wanted to change. And because she knew she wanted to change, somebody, a friend, sent her a most beautiful postcard. And in that postcard was a beach. And she loved the beach because she grew up on the beach. She told you so. She remembered her parents and her as a child being on the beach. And because she loved being on the beach, she lost herself in her imagination just looking through the postcard. And because she looked through the postcard, she healed herself. Hmm. So, what do you need? You just have to have the desire, my friend. But that's tomorrow. Let me carry on. The spacious surface of fact reflects rather than discloses, deflecting the eye of imagination from the truth that sets man free. The eye of imagination, if not deflected, looks on what ought to be there, not what is. Oh, Angela, say it again. The eye of imagination, if not deflected, looks on what ought to be there, not what is. However familiar the scene on which sight rests, the eye of imagination could gaze on one never before witnessed. What does that mean? It means you can look at a particular thing over and over and over and over again. And if you're looking by way of your eyes, it'll be what it is. But if you look at that thing that you've always been looking at and you look at it now with your imagination, you will begin to see something you've never before witnessed. Yes? It is this eye of imagination, and only this, that can free us from the sense fixation of outer things, which completely dominates our ordinary existence and keeps us looking on the reflective glass of facts. It is possible to pass from thinking of to thinking from. But the crucial matter is thinking from. For example, experiencing the state. How did she experience it? She remembered and she saw in her mind's eye how she was walking on the sand, the hard sand under her feet. Mhm. And the cold water running over her toes. She felt that as she looked through that postcard. So that's what it means to pass from thinking of to thinking from. Experiencing the state. For that experience means unification. Well, in order for you to experience something, you have to be one with it, do you not? Whereas in thinking of, there is always subject and object. When you think of something, there's a separation between you and the thing you're thinking of. Okay? When you are thinking of something, there is a separation between you and it. So you and the object. But when you think from it, there's only one thing because you've just embodied it. There's only one. Two have become one. The thinking individual and the thing thought of. That is what subject and object are. So self abandonment, that is the secret. Well, how do you mean? We have to abandon ourselves to the state in our love for the state. And in so doing, live the life of the state and no more our present state. Hello? Which, remember the postcard? Remember the postcard? She abandoned herself in that image because she remembered how much she loved the beach. So it was just so easy for her to lose herself in it. That is abandonment. So we have to abandon ourselves to the state in our love for the state. And in so doing, live the life of the state and no more our present state. Imagination seizes upon the life of the state and gives itself to the expression of the life of that state. Faith plus love is self commission. We cannot commit ourselves to what we do not love. Never would you have made anything if you had not loved it. And to make the state alive, one must become it. I live, yet not I. God lives in me, and the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I know scripture is in there, but listen to what it means. I live, yet not I. God lives in me, and the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of God who loved me and gave himself for me. That does not mean what you think it does. It doesn't mean that somebody died on the cross for you, not in the literal sense. But because think about it, if it was in the literal sense, how could you apply it to your everyday life? Listen to it mentally now, psychologically. I live, but yet not I. Hmm. God lives in me. Well, now, allegedly, God is spirit. What is spirit if not breath? Without the breath inside of you, in other words, if you weren't breathing, well, you'd be dead. So the air in your lungs is one with your flesh. The air in your lungs, you think that's air you're breathing now. You see, it's not air, it's God, but you know how it is. We don't like to hear the word God. You don't have to like the word God because that word has been tainted in so many ways. But think about it as breath. You inhale and you exhale, correct? And if you know that you take that away and you no longer inhale and exhale, well, then you're no longer alive. So then God must be the very breath in your lungs. And the breath in your lungs is not separate from you, but one with you. So you see, remember what he said, experiencing the state. For that experience means unification. Whereas in thinking of, there is always a subject and an object, a separation, the individual and the thing thought of. So if you are going to think of you and God, you see, there's two things. But if you say and you think from, the breath in my lungs is one with my body, well, there can't be two. So now you begin to understand what God is, who God is, not some man with a big stick who's going to beat you if you cuss or you fornicate or whatever else the church tells you. That's not God. God is not separate from you. So when it says that God uh, gave himself, the very act of God putting himself in your lungs should tell you how valuable you are. There was no, well, I know she gonna make a lot of mistakes, eh? She ain't gonna listen to anything I have to say. Should I even put my breath in her body? I don't know. God did not say that. The very fact that you have the breath in your lungs tells you what unconditional love is. So it doesn't matter how high you go, how low you go. No, ain't no mountain high enough, okay? Ain't no valley low enough to keep me from you. Hello, that is what God says to you. But again, you've got to separate this whole dogma and put it into cold, hard, beautiful truth, which is he gave himself for you. Why? John 3, verse 16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Do you understand what that means? When you love something so much, you become it. So what did God do then? God became, that's what I thought. God became me, God became you. But it's not like you and I are separate because there's only one God to begin with, only one breath. I'm breathing. I might be all the way in Canada. You might be all the way in Texas, but we're all breathing one breath. Do you understand? Meaning one God. So when you put that together, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Who's the begotten Son? I might look like a daughter, but I'm still a son. Hello. So today, when Neville says, I live, yet not I, God lives in me, and the life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Listen, if that does not want to make you say hallelujah, I don't know what will. It says, God loved man, his created, and became man in faith that this act of self commission would transform the created into the creative. So William Blake said, God became man that man can become God. We must be imitators of God as dear children and commit ourselves to what we love, as God who loved us committed himself to us. We must be the state to experience the state. The center of conscious imagining can be shifted. And what are now mere wishes, imaginal activities keyed low, brought into penetrative focus and entered. Entrance commits us to the state. You have to enter into something. You have to enter into something. You have to commit to something, right? So entrance commits us to the state. The possibilities of such shifting of the center of imagining are startling. The activities concerned are psychical throughout. So they're psychic throughout. Here, mental. The universe is a mental creation. The all is mind. Mentalism. The shifting of the center of imagining is not brought about by spatial travel, but by a change in what we are aware of. The boundary of the world of sense is a subjective barrier. So long as the senses take notice, the eye of imagination is deflected from the truth. We do not get far unless we let go. Now, listen to this story. This lady let go with immediate and miraculous results. She said, Neville, thank you for the golden key. It has released my brother from the hospital from pain and probable death, for he was facing a fourth major operation with little hope of recovery. And I was very concerned and attempting to use what I had learned about my imagination. I first asked myself, what my brother truly desired. Does he want to continue in this body, or does he desire to be free of it? The question revolved itself over and over in my mind, and suddenly I felt that he would like to continue remodeling his kitchen, which he had been contemplating before his confinement in the hospital. I knew my question had been answered, so I began to imagine from that point. Attempting to see my brother in the busy activity of remodeling, I suddenly found myself gripping the back of the kitchen chair I had used many times when something happened. And then suddenly, I found myself standing beside my brother's bed in the hospital. Well, this was the last place I would have wanted to be, physically or mentally, but there I was. And my brother's hand reached up and clasped my hand tightly as I heard him say, "I knew you would come, Joe." It was a well hand I had clasped, strong and sure. And the joy that filled and spilled over in my voice as I heard myself say, "It's all better now. You know it." My brother did not answer, but I distinctly heard a voice say to me, "Remember this moment." I seemed to awake then, back in my own home. This took place the night after he had entered the hospital. The following day, his wife telephoned me saying, "It's unbelievable. The doctor can't account for it, Joe, but no operation is necessary. He's so improved that they have agreed to release him tomorrow." The following Monday, my brother went back to his work and has been perfectly well since that day. Signed, J.S. Not facts, but dreams of fancy shape our lives. What was the fact? That he was in the hospital. And what was her dream of fancy? Everything is all right now. She needed no compass to find her brother, nor tools to operate, only the eye of imagination. In the world of sense, we see what we have to see. In the world of imagination, we see what we want to see. Oh, you know, Angela, you got to say it again. In the world of sense, glasses, the sense would be the eyes, ears, or hearing, that's the sense. In the world of sense, we see what we have to see. In the world of imagination, we see what we want to see. And seeing it, we create it for the world of sense to see. Uh, We see the outer world automatically. Seeing what we want to see demands voluntary and conscious imaginative effort. Our future is our own imaginal activity in its creative march. You see, common sense assures us that we are living in a solid and sensible world. But this so seemingly solid world is in reality imaginal through and through. Well, isn't that what scientists tell us? That even though my phone right now with Twitter on it looks solid, it actually isn't. But the eye sees what it has to see, does it not? Now, this following story proves that it is possible for an individual to transfer the center of imagining to some greater or lesser degree to a distant area, and not only do so without moving physically, but to be visible to others who are present at that point in space time. And if this be a dream, then is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? Seated in my living room in San Francisco, I imagined I was in my daughter's living room in London, England. I surrounded myself so completely with that room, which I knew intimately, that I suddenly found myself actually standing in it. My daughter was standing by her fireplace, her face turned away from me. A moment later, she turned and our eyes met. I saw such a startled, frightened expression on her face that I too became emotionally upset and immediately found myself back in my own living room in San Francisco. 5 days later, I received an airmail letter from my daughter. I remember those days when I used to write letters and put a little airmail sticker on it with the envelope red, white, and blue around the edges. Listen, those were the good old days. 5 days later, I received an airmail letter from my daughter, which had been written on the day of my experiment with imaginal travel. In her letter, she told me she had seen me in her living room that day just as real as though I were actually standing there in the flesh. She confessed she had been very frightened and that before she could speak, I had vanished. The time of this visitation, as she gave it in her letter, was exactly the time I had begun the imaginative action, allowing, of course, for the difference in time between the 2 points. She explained that she told her husband of this amazing experience, and he insisted that she write to me immediately, as he stated, "Your mother must have died or is dying." But I wasn't dead or dying, but very much alive and very excited by this marvelous experience. Signed, MLJ. Thomas Carlyle says, "Nothing can act but where it is. With all my heart, only where is it? Nothing can act but where it is. And with all of my heart, only where is it?" Thomas Carlyle. Man is all imagination. Therefore, a man must be where he is in imagination, for his imagination is himself. Imagination is active. Imagination is active at and through any state that it is aware of. If we take shifting of awareness seriously, there are possibilities beyond belief. The senses join man in forced and unholy wedlock to what, were he imaginatively awake, he would put asunder. Well, have you heard those before? Those words, marriage vows. We need not feed on sense data. Shift the focus of awareness and see what happens. However little we move mentally, we should perceive the world under a slightly changed aspect. Awareness is usually moved about in space by movement of the physical organism, but it need not be so restricted. It can be moved by a change in what we are aware of. Man is manifesting the power of imagination, whose limits he cannot define. To realize that the real self, imagination, is not something enclosed within the spatial boundary of the body is most important. The foregoing story proves that when we meet a person in the flesh, that his real self need not be present in space where his body is. It also shows that sense perception can be thrown into operation outside of the normal physical means, and that the sense data produced is of the same kind as those which occur in normal perception. The idea in the mother's mind, which started the whole process going, was the very definite idea of being in the place where her daughter lived. And if the mother really were in that place, and if the daughter were present, then she would have to be perceptible to her daughter. We can only hope to understand this experience in imaginal and not in mechanical or materialistic terms. The mother imagined elsewhere as being here. London was just as here to her daughter living there as San Francisco was here. to the mother living there. It hardly ever crosses our minds that this world might be different in essence from what common sense tells us. So obviously it is. William Blake writes, I question not my corporeal or vegetative eye any more than I would question a window concerning a sight. I look through it and not with it. Hello, did you understand? You look through the window. You don't look with the window. This looking through the eye not only shifts consciousness to other parts of this world, but to other worlds as well. Astronomers might wish they knew more of this, looking through the eye, this mental traveling that mystics practice so easily. I traveled through a land of men and women too, and heard and saw such dreadful things as cold earth wanderers never knew. I have to slide in there because Confucius says you can travel the whole world without ever leaving your door. You can travel the whole world without ever leaving your door. You travel mentally. Mental traveling has been practiced by awakened men and women since the earliest days. Paul states, oh, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven, whether in the body or not, or whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. 2 Corinthians 12. Paul is telling us that he is that man and that he traveled by the power of imagination or Christ. In his next letter to the Corinthians, he writes, test yourselves. Do you not realize that Jesus Christ is in you? We need not be dead in order to enjoy spiritual privileges. You know what that means? You know, when they tell you, all my treasures are stored up in heaven because I'm going to be in heaven one of these days. We need not be dead in order to enjoy spiritual privileges. Man is all imagination and God is man. Test yourselves as this mother did. Oh. Sir Arthur Eddington said that all we have a right to say of the external world is that it is a shared experience. Things are more or less real according to the extent to which they are capable of being shared with others or with ourselves at another time. But there's no hard and fast line. Accepting Eddington's definition of reality as shared experience, the above story is as real as the earth or a color, for it was shared by both mother and daughter. The range of imagining is such that I must confess that I do not know what limits, if any, there are to its ability to create reality. All these stories show us one thing, that an imaginal activity implying the wish fulfilled must start in the imagination, apart from the evidence of the senses in that journey that leads to the realization of desire. And there concludes chapter 8, my beautiful friends. I trust that tonight's lecture made sense to you because there are many stories. There's a health story there. We heard many stories over the past couple of nights. I know one of them stuck out to you. But let us practice right now, shall we? What do you want to become? See it in your mind's eye. Don't judge it. Well, I don't know if I can become that. I don't have the credentials to do that. I don't know what to do to get that. I don't have the money to do that. That is not the assignment. The assignment is to answer the question simply, what do you want to become? And when you answer the question of what I want to become, you begin to see it in your mind's eye. And that is where you immerse yourself. But once you see it in your mind's eye, something else happens to you. You begin to feel like you are it. You became one with it. You're not saying, I'm here and money's over there. No, you are wealth itself. So wherever you are in imagination is where you must be in the flesh. You argue in your imagination, well, in the flesh, you're going to have an argument with somebody. So you see, tonight, as we slide into the silence, what do you want to become? Well, then, begin to experience it in imagination as you would be doing it in reality. And then do what? Immerse yourself in the feeling of its fulfillment, the thrill of excitement that says, yes, I did it. And then the knowing that you've done it. That is what we do in the silence. Now, let us slide into the silence for 5 minutes. And there concludes our 5 minutes. I trust that tonight's lecture was helpful for you and that you will test yourselves to see where you keep your imagination, where you keep your attention. And I trust that whichever story stuck out to you the most, you'll go with that one so that you will practice applying it. Okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Relax. I got you, big boy. I got you, big boy. Yeah, mommy's got her baby. Don't beat me with your wings. Relax. Relax. All right, y'all. Countdown initiated. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night, real Ruby. Yes, and Emmanuel. Okay. Stay there for a minute. Stay there. Because he gets a little persnickety if I hold him and he's just not comfortable in my arms. He wants to be in my lap. Real Ruby, Wisdom Almighty, NSR, UR, Shea Butter, LD, and Nakisha, and Edith. Oh wow, I didn't listen to there's so many people here on YouTube. I didn't even see you, Edith. Twitter is as Twitter does. Moon and Dolphin Duck, the lovely KZ. Miss Miriam. It's good to see you. Flo Smiles and Thick. All of you, thank you for being here tonight. You know I love you. Remember to rest well and to practice. And I'll see you in the morning where we will do some exercises. Oh, indeed. We're going to stretch the imagination. Ow. Anyway, I love you. I'll see you on tomorrow, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Right here on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and Fanbase. Mwah. Good night, everybody. Good night.